Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson for Gold Derby, and I'm excited to be here with Miguel Sapochnik, the director of the film Finch, starring Tom Hanks, which debuts on Apple TV Plus on November 5th. Miguel, this seemed like a huge undertaking with a lot of technology, some pretty incredible production design and location shoots, and a dog and a robot as two of the three main characters. So, what drew you to this story and inspired you to take this on?
Um, uh, I think that I found the script had a remarkable lack of sentimentality that was surprising because I kept expecting it to just fall into the kind of slightly soppy world of I love you, no, I love you, but it didn't. It somehow managed to hold its own, and it was written by Craig Luck and Ivor Powell. And Ivor is a very old friend of mine who actually gave me my break in commercials, and so we've been wanting to make a movie together for a long time. We've written many movies together, and we hadn't really, had the opportunity. And then suddenly the stars aligned, and here was this movie. And so I think the people made a huge difference because I've realized that it's really important to me who I'm working with, um, and 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 the idea of doing something that was the antithesis of what I had been doing over the last 3 or 4 years was also a great pull. And I like dogs.
And very few, if any, actors can deliver the way Tom Hanks does, in that he owns the screen for nearly the entirety of the film. He gives such an incredible performance as he always does. What is it like working with Tom Hanks, who just embodies Finch and so quickly pulls the audience into this world?
Um, it was a pleasure. He's extremely professional. He's extremely good at what he does. He's very, very collaborative. Um, he would call the movie our movie. He still does. And and that's something. It's a small thing, but it makes a big difference. If you're an aspiring filmmaker and you have somebody who's had that much experience and can clearly do probably anything that he wants, and he chooses to work with you on uh, a project that you've probably been on for years, then it really made a difference. And so I think just having his seal of approval was a huge thing, but then getting to work with him and feeling like we were a partnership, that it was great. It really was.
And the film is set in Missouri, but it certainly doesn't look like Missouri, at least as people would recognize it today. Can you
Mm.
tell us about the actual shooting of this film, the locations you filmed at, and the overall look and feel of the setting that you were trying to develop in this world?
Well, so everything that we did in the film, we really started with science as a reference point. And it's not that we completely, blindly stuck to that, because I think sometimes you have to make choices. You have to take artistic license in a story because it has to fit into the narrative you're trying to tell. But we were really interested in following Finch's example, who was a man of science, and basing it, steeping it in what we thought would really happen. And so we talked to scientists and experts and futurists about the potential impact of a gamma flare on our Earth. And one of the big things, I mean, there's many things that would happen. One of the big things was the hole in the ozone layer that it would create allows for an enormous amount of radiation to come down from the sun and pretty much fry everything and heat up the atmosphere of the Earth and the surface of the Earth. So one of the big mandates when looking for a location was it needed to have no vegetation whatsoever, and that narrows you right down. Um, and so we found ourselves suddenly looking at, we had to have, we needed to be able to do a road trip movie, which means we needed a large area, I know, a state or two, and we also needed a tax incentive, which is often the case. And so we ended up in New Mexico. And New Mexico has these incredibly beautiful, but sometimes really inhospitable, barren landscapes. And so it was a case of just like taking the idea of Missouri or the idea of any state where literally the water has evaporated within a matter of days, and imagining it. There's a particular scene where they're heading out of the city, and Finch starts kind of nostalgically remembering these fields that are now sand dunes, but he remembers as being full of kind of, mustard seed and basically fields of flowers. And that for me was a really great moment of when we were out location scouting. We were driving through this place called White Sands in New Mexico, which is incredible, but it's just an endless kind of barrage of white sand dunes. And I was thinking, this is great, but what could this be? And then I realized, oh, right, it's what it's not. And that mindset helped a lot in the choosing of locations and the styling of the film.
And I want to talk about the robots and your ability to make them so heartwarming yet robotic at the same time. You've got, of course, this main robot, Jeff, who's built to mimic human life, but looks very much like a robot. And you also have Dewey, who I loved personally, and he's almost more like a pet. How much of the robots is shot in the way as it appears on film? And then how much do you need to use CGI or other technology to really bring these characters to life?
So I'm a firm believer in kind of distracting the eye, and so it's something from I remember watching Lord of the Rings and how they made everybody seem giant, and everyone, how they changed the size of characters, and you realize that there was no one technique. It was multiple different techniques. It was really a case by case basis. So here Dewey was an entirely practical radio controlled puppet. Right, operated by 6 people, could follow Tom around when, because it was 6 guys from Legacy, trying to, which was the company that designed it, that built it, learning to work in synchronicity with each other. They would continue operating Dewey when we were between takes. So Dewey was this kind of constantly moving puppet that would be looking around, and if Tom would reach out to touch Dewey, Dewey would retract, and we weren't even filming, but it was just this kind of thing, a process of everybody getting to know each other. Conversely, Jeff was an entirely CG animated character based on movement for movement, an actor, Caleb Landry Jones, motion capture performance. It was actually a faux cap. It's like cheap man's motion capture. So Tom and Caleb were in every single scene together. Caleb was dressed in a suit that looked vaguely like Jeff, and then that allowed Tom to have real scenes, really interact, for us to film it in a way as if it was a family drama rather than a science fiction movie. And then later on, we would digitally remove Caleb and replace him with this proxy of an animated digital robot.
That's fascinating because I didn't realize that Caleb Landry Jones was actually on set. So that was going to be my next question, but that's really interesting. We also have Seamus, who plays the beloved Doug Goodyear. And he himself is sort of this rags to riches story in that in real life, he's this rescued stray that, before he was even able to set foot on his first set, and many were saying he was unadoptable, but he was taken in by this Hollywood trainer. What was that like to work just not with an animal on set, but one that was new to show business?
It was pretty awesome. I mean, I was definitely tentative, and I was wary of it because, don't work with animals and children. And now I'm working with animals, children, robots. It's like I would love to work with something that sounds like it might be easy to work with, but suddenly I'm there with this dog, and I think the secret that we discovered is that if we didn't anthropomorphize the dog and we allowed it to just be a dog, suddenly all of the concerns about whether the dog would actually perform evaporated, because the only thing the dog had to do was be a dog. So we brought the bar down somewhat in a way, and then suddenly Seamus the dog was great at doing what he did, and Seamus had absolutely zero interest in being on a set. He liked getting fed the little kind of doggy biscuits, and Mark Forbes, who was his trainer, who was amazing actually, we all there was a lot of effort made to make sure that Seamus had a good experience. It seemed really important that we didn't want to be exploiting a dog in this process. We wanted to actually have the dog enjoy the process, and the dog basically had a line of people waiting to give him hugs whenever he walked off the set. So he had a good time and he enjoyed it, and when he didn't want hugs, no one gave him hugs. It was kind of pretty straightforward. But the thing that was interesting is sometimes you would sit there and you go, he's not quite doing the thing that we want to do, why don't we just try and get a single shot on him? And you would put the camera on him and everyone would sit back in that mode of like, okay, this is going to be a while. And one take every time. Like it was just amazing. He would just come alive. It would just be like suddenly he was like, oh, I'm on camera. And he would just do all of these crazy little things. And then in the edit room, you could choose from a smorgasbord of different reactions, and it was all with a whistle. There was a whistle or a little clicker, and he would just do all of these crazy things. And so I've got to say, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to overconfidently walk into another dog movie thinking that it will be as easy as this, and then be horrified at how difficult it actually is. But this experience was great.
Well, the chemistry between these three characters is incredible, and I have to admit, about halfway through watching it, I did hug my dog. So you definitely got the emotion from the audience that you were looking for. When you look back on this film, what is maybe your one of your most enjoyable scenes that you filmed? Like, what was one of your favorite days on set?
I think the naming of Jeff was one of my favorite scenes to shoot. And a lot of that is to do with, it was the very end of the shoot. Both Tom and Caleb, they knew their characters really well at this point. So there had been a lot of improvisation as we went through the shoot, but improvisation is quite, I learned on this that I hadn't learned before. Improvisation, to get it right, for it to actually be usable, it's quite tough. But they had this scene, they knew the lines, they were at the end of the shoot, they just had this really funny 3 hours where the two of them sat there and kind of toyed with each other. And it was wonderful. It was kind of like a joy to watch, and it was funny, and it was kind of meaningful as well, and it translated itself onto the screen in a very simplistic but very endearing way, I thought. Like the words are the same as the script, but all the passing of objects and this attempt that Jeff keeps trying to help, that was all Caleb and Tom just riffing on an idea. And I think when you have moments like that, it makes you feel like all the stars have aligned, everything suddenly come together, and there's something very deeply gratifying about that as a filmmaker.
Well, Miguel, I encourage our viewers to check out Finch on Apple TV Plus if you haven't already, and then head over to Gold Derby, our app, and goldderby.com. Make your Oscar predictions and predictions for all the other upcoming awards. You can also check out more interviews with top contenders like Miguel here. And again, Miguel, congratulations on this film and good luck with everything. And thanks for chatting with us about your work on Finch.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Take care.